Good day everyone, and welcome to a new video in the series of videos Learn the Caro-Kann Defence. In the previous video we've discussed the advanced variation of the Caro-Kann, and today we're going to take a look at another variation called the exchange variation. The game starts by e4, c6, d4 and then d5, and instead of advancing the pawn here to e5, white may take the pawn on the d5, and after you take back, an exchange of pawns just happened here on the d5 square, and hence the name, the exchange variation. And here in this position, the most commonly moves played by white would be bishop to d3. They can go knight to f3, or straight away they can play c4, the aggressive c4 or the Panov-Botvinnik attack. If you want to actually play the Caro-Kann, you need to know about this line and how to respond to it the appropriate way. We will discuss this line in detail in a separate video. So let's take a look at white fourth move, bishop to d3. Here your main idea is to get your minor pieces out and start to attack on the queen side. And that would be by bringing the knight to f6. There is no there is no knight here to pin yet on the f3 square. So bring the knight first, and after white plays knight to f3, you carry on pinning the knight to the queen. You are always happy to exchange that knight with this, to exchange that bishop with this knight. This is not going to be your favorite bishop in the game, because your pawns will be controlling most of the light squares, so that bishop would be limited. So you're happy to just exchange it with similar material. White will castle. White may play h3 early on, doesn't really matter. You play a6, h3 now by white. You exchange the material, you bring your dark squared bishop out to e7. You're ready to castle, and again you are aiming for an attack here on the queen side, planning to get your knight to c6, play a6, that's followed by b5, get your rook to c8, controlling that semi-open file. Your queen should be active on the c7 square or even the b6 square. Even the d6 square is also a good square for your queen, and your game should be fine in this position. After the exchange, white can go knight to f3. Here you carry on pinning the knight again. White may try to defend this knight with the bishop to e2, ready to castle. And again the same applies. You go e6, castling by white, your knight out, h3 now by white. You exchange the bishop for the knight. Knight to c6 first, or bishop to e7 first, doesn't really matter. And then after that you are ready to castle, and your strategy, your idea should remain the same, attacking on the queen side. So what's different about today's video then? Well, after the exchange, the game can carry on in a different way, in a different sequence of moves. You need to get actually familiar with this sequence. For example, after white plays knight to f3, you may delay pinning the knight for one move and go knight to c6 straight away. And the idea is you're adding pressure on that pawn for later. Especially after bringing the queen to b6 here, you add more pressure on that pawn. This knight will not be able to defend that pawn, especially if the bishop comes to g4 and pin it to the queen. So white is aware about that, and they would lose some tempo defending this pawn and play c3, the most logic and the most common move for white to defend the d4 pawn. And here you go again with bishop to g4. White can respond here with different ways. Most commonly they can play h3 early on, and again you just exchange similar material. You get your knight out and they get their bishops out. e6 again, after white castles, you bring your dark squared bishop out, and the same strategy applies in this position. But what if white actually try to also pin this knight to the king? and go bishop to b5. If white plays bishop to b5, they are also willing to exchange their bishop for similar material, because that bishop will not going to be a good bishop for them, so they may try to exchange it early on in the game. And here you want to add more protection to this knight by playing queen to b6. If white exchange, you're going to not to take with the queen but with the pawn here. Why? Because you want to keep an eye on that pawn for later. If white leave the defense of that pawn, we will discuss how to deal with it in that case. So after you take with the pawn, white goes for castling. You bring your knight out. Here the dark square bishop is out, and you can still take the pawn here on the b2. But be careful if white surrendered the defense of that pawn on the c3. For example, if white goes knight b to d2, here you don't want to take that pawn. It's not for free, that pawn. And this pawn can actually cost you the whole game, or your queen may get trapped very easily in this position. And how is that possible? Let's take a look. For example, if you decided to take, and you've done this mistake, white in this position can go queen to a4. That's a very good move by white. And why is that? Because they are threatening to bring one of these rooks here to c1 and gaining more control over that, over that file, sniping that pawn as well later on. Here white is, for example, planning to bring, this rook to c1, adding more pressure here on that pawn. You would find out with time that the queen will be limited of safe squares for later. So you want to diffuse that idea and bring your bishop to d7. And after bishop to d7, white can also still play rook to b1. What they are threatening two things: either rook to b3, trapping the queen. If you didn't pay attention and played something, let's say h3, they can bring the rook here to b3. And in this position, the only safe square for the queen will be c2 square. And guess what? White can sacrifice the rook with a check and winning your queen. So that's not what you want. So here you have to be careful about white's plan trapping the queen. Another thing white can play is after this move, the bishop to d7. Here white can go still with the rook to b1. And if you didn't pay attention and play h3, for example, I'm just giving an example here, white can go knight to e5. What's actually white trying to do is trying to take control over these squares here. If you didn't pay attention, again, white can play this brilliant move, sacrificing the queen. And if you decided to take here, that's a checkmate in 2. You can no longer jump to that square anymore because the knight here is taking control. So you have to be careful here dealing with that pawn. Taking that pawn is not actually for free. The best for you here is just to try to retreat with your queen to the a3 square to get it, into a safer file, or perhaps if white here in this position, for example, let's say, decided to take, we discussed that, decided to bring the rook here, you can take back with this this pawn with the queen, and you can secure an easy drawing position here. So that shouldn't be a problem. Now let's take a look at another move white can play. After you pin the knight to the queen, white can go queen to b3, aiming to take that pawn here on the b7. It's better here for you to defend with the queen, so you go queen to d7 instead of just moving the pawn an extra square forward. Your aim is to control as much light squares as you can, not the dark squares. So it's better, instead of just moving the pawn forward, you just defend with the queen. And after that, each side will carry on developing their pieces. White sometimes can jump with the knight to the e5 square. They want to get rid of this defender here on the queen side. You're happy again to exchange, but be careful here after the exchange. White has got this powerful move, bishop to b5, pinning the queen to the king, and you just need to play this prophylactic move to prevent this sneaky idea. Right, one last move White can play. It shouldn't be a problem for you as well. They can defend early with bishop to e2, and here you just carry on with the same. Bring your knight to f6, White castles, you play a6, bishop to f4. If White plays bishop to f4, the dark squared bishops here are strong bishops. This bishop in particular for White is actually very annoying, enjoying this diagonal. So you may want to exchange it early on in the game and just get rid of the dark squared bishops. The game is more or less equal. Your strategy here would be the same. You want to castle, you want to have your attacking on the queen side, and the same strategy here applies. I hope you enjoyed today's video, guys. I'm more than happy to read your comments, your suggestions for the following videos. Write to me what would you like to discuss, and stay tuned for the Panopotvinnik attack video. Very important line to get familiar with if you want to establish a good repertoire with the Caro-Kann defense in general. I wish you a good day, guys, and I hope to see you soon.